Every morning, without fail, the clock in the café strikes 8:15 and the door opens. And every morning, it's him. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, another regular customer with a fixed routine, but soon I realized there was something about his presence that unsettled me. He never changed his order, Americano, no sugar. By the third week, I already had the cup in hand before he reached the counter. His steps were always calm, steady, and yet there was a quiet weight in them, as if he carried an invisible burden. I would slide the cup toward him, he would nod slightly, take it, and leave. No words, no small talk, no lingering. Just a ritual, repeated daily like clockwork. Still, his silence felt louder than most conversations I overheard across the café. He wasn't cold, there was something softer beneath the surface, like a melody that hadn't yet been played. Months passed like this. Sometimes I wondered if I had imagined the flicker in his eyes when they met mine. I told myself it didn't matter, that he was just a customer, and I was just the barista behind the counter. But every morning, my chest tightened in anticipation. It became clear, my day didn't truly begin until the door opened and he stepped inside. And though I didn't know his name, or anything about him, his presence had already become part of my life. Then one morning, everything shifted. He approached the counter as always, but instead of simply waiting for his drink, he looked at me directly for the first time. His voice, low and even, startled me, "Write today on the cup." I hesitated, the marker hovering in my hand. But I did as he asked. Carefully, I printed the letters and handed him the coffee. He studied the word for a moment, then smiled, a genuine smile, quiet but filled with something unspoken. My heart skipped, though I tried to mask it with indifference. The next day, he asked for smile. Then wait. Each request was different, yet deliberate, like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't yet see. My curiosity grew unbearable. So one morning, I decided to respond. When he asked for hope, I wrote back on the other side. When he asked for rain, I wrote shine. His eyes lingered on the words, and his smile returned, wider this time, almost conspiratorial. That was the beginning of something neither of us could explain. The cups became letters, the marker our pen. No one else noticed, but for us, it was a secret language, a fragile thread binding two strangers. He left, as always, without another word. But when I cleaned the counter, I couldn't stop staring at the empty space where his coffee had been, already waiting for the next message. From that day forward, my mornings were no longer routine. I woke with questions swirling in my head. What word would he choose today? What message would I be asked to carry? His requests varied, sometimes simple nouns like light, dream, music, and sometimes questions, why? When? I answered each in my own way. Because. Soon. Maybe. It was like a dialogue written in fragments, but one that somehow spoke volumes. I began to feel bold. My handwriting grew freer, my responses more daring. The moment I passed him the cup, I watched closely for the shift in his expression. The spark in his gray eyes never failed to appear, as if he lived for my answers. And though he remained silent, his gaze told me he was waiting, needing this exchange as much as I did. I found myself thinking of him outside of work. At night, lying in bed, I replayed our messages in my head, searching for hidden meanings. In the morning, I arrived early, just in case he came sooner. And though I never admitted it aloud, I knew the truth, I wasn't just serving coffee. I was writing pieces of myself, offering them to a stranger who somehow already felt less like a stranger. Then one morning, he didn't come. At 8:15, I glanced at the door. Nothing. At 8:30, my chest grew tight. At 9 o'clock, the emptiness became unbearable. I served other customers with a smile plastered on my face, but inside I was unraveling. The cup stayed blank. My hand ached to write, but there was no one to write for. The second day was worse. I kept glancing toward the door, convincing myself I saw his silhouette in every man who entered. By the end of my shift, I felt foolish. Maybe he was gone for good. Maybe this was only a fleeting game for him, one I had given too much of myself to. On the third day, just as I was losing hope, the door opened, and it was him. Relief flooded me, almost knocking me breathless. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, his phone gripped tightly in one hand. He placed the cup down and whispered, "Right, missed." My hand trembled as I wrote it. On the other side, I added, "Me too." For the first time, his gaze truly held mine. In his eyes, I saw gratitude, sadness, and something achingly tender. And in that moment, I realized, this was no longer a game. It was something real. After that day, his words grew heavier. No longer light or playful, they became confessions. Close. Need. Tomorrow. My responses grew braver too, here. Same. Always. Each letter I wrote felt like carving out a piece of my heart, pressing it into the cardboard for him to carry away. I started to live for those exchanges. The rest of the world blurred, but the moment he held the cup with my answer, everything sharpened. I began to recognize the rhythm of our silence, the way his hand lingered an extra second on the cup, the way his shoulders eased only after reading my reply. He didn't just want coffee. He wanted this, us. And yet, fear crept in. Each word drew us closer to something inevitable, something neither of us dared to name. My heart pounded faster with every new note, torn between wanting more and fearing what more would mean. The cafe had become a stage for a love story written in fragments, and I was no longer just the barista. I was a woman waiting, hoping, trembling with each passing morning. And as his gray eyes caught mine again, I knew he was trembling too. The more time passed, the more my anticipation grew unbearable. I no longer waited for customers in general, I waited for him. My ears tuned themselves to the sound of the bell above the door, my eyes flicked toward the entrance every few minutes, my hands clutched the marker before I even realized it. Without him, the cafe felt incomplete. With him, it became alive. That morning, he approached as usual but seemed quieter, more thoughtful. He asked me to write just one word, why. My heart stopped. It felt like he was reaching directly into me, demanding an answer I wasn't ready to give. My hand hesitated, but finally, I turned the cup and wrote, because. When he saw it, the corner of his lips curved into the smallest of smiles, and in that subtle gesture, I read more than I had ever heard him say. His eyes softened, holding mine a heartbeat longer. For the first time, I realized he wasn't only playing a game with me. He was searching, reaching out. He needed this as much as I did. As he left, I held on to the marker, my fingers tingling. It was no longer about coffee. It was about a question and an answer, a fragile thread pulling us closer. And though fear gnawed at me, I already knew, I was ready to follow wherever this led. But then, as though testing my fragile hope, he disappeared again. One morning, 8:15 came and went. My eyes betrayed me, darting to the door with every ring of the bell, only to find strangers. I told myself to stay calm, to smile, to make lattes and cappuccinos as if nothing were missing. But the emptiness clawed at me, deeper than I wanted to admit. That night, walking home, I searched faces in the crowded New York streets, my heart leaping at every dark coat, every tall silhouette. But none were him. The next morning, he returned. Relief slammed into me so hard my knees nearly buckled. He looked weary, his shoulders sagging, his expression heavy. When he handed me the cup, he asked quietly, "Right, wait." My chest tightened. I forced myself to breathe as I wrote it. On the back, without hesitation, I added, "Always." He took the cup and didn't leave right away. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. The cafe around us buzzed with chatter and clinking cups, but in that second, the world fell away. Silence pressed against us, louder than any words could ever be. After that, his words shifted again. They became personal, almost vulnerable, near. Feel. Lost. Each one struck me like a secret confession. My replies grew instinctive, here. Yes. Found. My hand no longer shook as I wrote. I wanted him to see me, to know I was answering with my whole heart. But the more he revealed, the more he occupied my thoughts. At night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the city lights outside my window, and imagined his hands holding the cup, his eyes reading my words. The thought both warmed and frightened me. Then came the word that unsettled me most: tomorrow? My pulse raced as I stared at it. Did he mean a promise? An invitation? Or something darker, like a warning? My marker hovered over the cardboard far too long. Finally, I wrote, maybe. When he read it, his eyes lit up, as if my uncertainty was enough, proof that I cared. That night, I lay awake, repeating his word in my head. Tomorrow. And I realized, with equal parts fear and longing, that my life had become divided into befores and afters, all because of one man and one word. I began noticing everything about him: the way he straightened his sleeves, the habit of checking his coat pocket, the way his fingers curled protectively around the cup before his first sip. These details became precious, pieces of him that belonged only to me. Then one morning, he asked me to write a single word: name. My breath caught. It was a simple request, yet it carried the weight of everything we had left unsaid. He wanted to know me, truly. Fear rushed through me. My name was more than letters, it was a doorway. If I gave it, there would be no turning back. So I stalled. On the back of the cup, I wrote, guess. When he read it, his smile widened, and for the first time I saw a hint of playfulness in him. He looked at me in a way that made my heart ache, as though he already knew the answer. He left as always, but I stood there holding the marker, staring at my hand. I wasn't just writing words anymore. I was writing pieces of myself. And soon, whether I was ready or not, I would have to give him everything, including my name. The next day, he came earlier than ever, 8:05. I barely had time to set up the counter when the bell rang, and there he was. Something was different. He looked restless, his shoulders tense, his steps unsteady. He placed the cup down and said softly, "Right, truth." My heart thundered. My hand froze. For the first time, I couldn't bring myself to write immediately. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of unspoken confessions. Finally, I turned the cup and wrote, Emily. He stared at it, and his eyes widened with something like relief, like joy. My knees weakened under the intensity of his gaze. He lifted the cup, but instead of leaving, he stayed. He sipped the coffee slowly, then looked straight at me and spoke aloud for the first time. Daniel. Hearing his name in his own voice was like unlocking a door I hadn't realized was waiting. And in that instant, I knew, our silent story had ended, but something far more dangerous, and far more beautiful, had just begun. Daniel. His name echoed in me long after that morning, repeating like a secret melody I couldn't silence. I kept turning the memory over in my mind, the way his lips shaped the word, the way his eyes softened when he heard mine. We were no longer anonymous, no longer strangers bound only by ink. Names made us real, and that terrified me. Still, after that day, our ritual didn't stop. He continued asking me to write words, and I continued answering. Only now, the words carried a new weight. Closer. Stay. Forever. My replies grew bolder, yes. Please. Sometimes my hand trembled as I wrote, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of how much I wanted him, how much each note meant. The distance between us felt dangerous now. It burned where it used to comfort. I realized that silence could no longer protect us. We were moving towards something inevitable, and I didn't know whether it would save us or destroy us. But I couldn't pull away. The cups weren't just cardboard anymore. They were threads tying us together, and every morning, another knot pulled tighter. The first time our voices truly met was accidental. He asked for a napkin. Such a simple thing, but when I handed it to him, our fingers brushed. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but a warmth rushed through me so fiercely I nearly gasped. His quiet thank you felt more intimate than any of our written exchanges. The next day, he asked me to write voice. I knew what he meant. I turned the cup and wrote, "Yours." He paused longer than usual before leaving, his eyes searching mine. Something shifted between us. We were no longer hiding behind silence. We were on the edge of speaking, of breaking open everything we had held back. That night, I lay awake replaying his voice in my head, that simple thank you. I realized I wanted more. I wanted to hear how my name sounded when he said it again. I wanted to hear his laughter, his secrets. And I wanted him to hear mine. But then, one morning, his request cut deeper than all the others, "Don't forget me." The words stabbed at me. Why did they sound like goodbye? My hand shook so badly I almost couldn't write, but finally I scrawled on the back, "How could I?" When he read it, he didn't smile. He stared at the cup for a long moment, and in his gray eyes I saw something I hadn't before, sadness, heavy and unspoken. My chest ached with questions. Was he leaving? Was there something he wasn't telling me? But the cafe was crowded, and fear bound my tongue. I watched him walk out, his figure disappearing into the morning rush. For the first time, I felt powerless. The words on the cup weren't enough anymore. That night, sleep refused me. His note haunted me, circling in my thoughts. "Don't forget me." I gripped my pillow, staring at the ceiling, wishing I had asked him, wishing I had dared to cross the invisible line between us. Because suddenly, I feared he was already slipping away. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach twisted with dread. When the bell finally rang and he stepped inside, I nearly cried with relief. But Daniel wasn't the same. His face looked worn, pale, his shoulders heavy as if weighed down by something he couldn't share. He handed me the cup and said softly, "Write, remember." I turned it, my hands trembling, and wrote, "Always." When I gave it back, our eyes locked. And in his gaze, I saw it again, the shadow of goodbye. Panic surged through me. I wanted to call out, to demand answers, but the line of customers behind him pressed forward, pulling me back into routine. He left, and I stood frozen, watching the door close behind him. I gripped the marker until my hand ached. For the first time since this began, I felt truly afraid. Not of being discovered. Not of breaking the rules. But of losing him before I ever really had him. The next day, he didn't come. Nor the next. Each morning felt like a punishment. The cafe buzzed with its usual rhythm, orders shouted, machines steaming, laughter echoing, but to me, it was a hollow shell. I set cups out, lined them neatly, and left them blank. The marker beside me stayed untouched, mocking me with its silence. Every ring of the door jolted my heart, but each time it wasn't him. I smiled at strangers, but inside I was unraveling. After work, I stepped outside and walked the streets aimlessly. New York was alive with noise and light, but I searched every face, desperate to find his. I thought I saw him once, across the avenue, but when I ran closer, it wasn't him. My chest ached with disappointment. That night, alone in my apartment, I admitted the truth. I could no longer pretend this was just a game, or just coffee. I needed him. His words. His presence. And if he never returned, I would find a way to seek him out. Because silence had become unbearable, and losing him was something I could not accept. Days blurred together without him. I woke before dawn, the city outside still asleep, and lay staring at the ceiling, haunted by the same thought, what if he never comes back? The cafe became less a place of work and more a place of waiting. I moved through my shifts like an actress reciting lines, smiling at strangers while my heart stayed fixed on the door. Every sound of the bell above it sent my pulse racing, only to be crushed when it wasn't him. One evening, unable to bear the ache, I left after closing and walked the street I had seen him take so many times. The air was cool, the sidewalks crowded, neon lights reflecting in puddles. But no matter how hard I searched the faces around me, none were his. I felt foolish, but also desperate. When I returned home, I collapsed into a chair, staring at the untouched cup I had carried back with me. I had scrawled a single word on it earlier, here. It sat on my counter, mocking me with the hope I had poured into it. And for the first time, a terrible thought whispered inside me, maybe this had only ever been a game for him. But then, why did my chest ache as if I had lost something real? The next morning, I couldn't stop myself. I began writing words on cups even though he wasn't there to see them. Come back. Yours. Still waiting. I lined them up behind the counter like ghosts of conversations that never happened. My coworkers laughed at me, teasing that I was losing my mind. But they didn't understand. These weren't just cups. They were fragments of my heart, desperate messages sent into a silence only he could break. Then, on Monday, just as I had nearly convinced myself he was gone for good, the door opened, and it was him. My knees went weak. He looked exhausted, his hair mussed, his eyes rimmed with shadows. But when he approached the counter, there was still that familiar spark hiding in the gray. He handed me a cup and whispered, "Right, back." My hand trembled as I obeyed, the letters shaky but clear. On the back, without hesitation, I wrote, "Finally." When he took the cup, he didn't leave right away. He lingered, studying the words. His fingers curled around the cardboard as though it held more than coffee, like he knew it held me. Something changed after that day. His notes became longer, almost like sentences rather than fragments. I missed you. Do you wait for me? Can we meet? They weren't riddles anymore, they were confessions. My replies grew fearless, yes. Always. Please. Then came the one that stopped my heart. He asked me to write, "Coffee together?" The marker shook in my hand. This was no longer a safe ritual, no longer words hidden behind cardboard walls. This was real. And real was terrifying. For a long moment, I stared at the blank space, battling the fear and the longing. Then, finally, I wrote, "Yes." When he read it, something in him softened, almost relieved. For the first time, he didn't immediately turn to leave. He stayed there, at the counter, his eyes searching mine. And I realized my hands were trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of the choice I had just made. This wasn't a game. It never had been. It was a story writing itself across cups, and now, it was ready to be lived. The day of our first coffee together, my nerves nearly unraveled me. I set out cups, wiped the counter twice, tried to busy myself with tasks, but nothing stilled the flutter in my chest. When the bell rang and he walked in, time seemed to slow. This time, he didn't ask me to write a word. He simply looked at me and said my name, "Emily?" The sound of it on his lips rooted me to the spot. I nodded. "Sit with me?" he asked, his voice low but steady. My legs felt heavy as I stepped from behind the counter, holding 2 cups. We walked together to the small table by the window, the one I had watched him sit near countless times. But now, I was there too. We sat across from each other, the city bustling beyond the glass. For the first time, there was no counter, no marker, no secret messages. Just 2 cups of coffee and a silence of possibility stretching between us. My heart raced, but beneath it all was something I hadn't felt in weeks, peace. Our first conversation stumbled like a child learning to walk. We laughed nervously, fumbled over words, filled the air with talk of the weather, the coffee, the view outside. Nothing important, and yet everything mattered. Because each word was a step into the unknown. I noticed how his eyes lit up when I laughed, how he leaned forward as though he didn't want to miss a single sound from me. The city roared around us, honking cars, footsteps, sirens, but it all faded into background noise. At that table, it was only us. When his hand brushed the cup, I ached for him to reach just a little further, to touch mine. I wondered if he thought the same. At the end, he looked at me with a quiet intensity and asked, "Tomorrow?" I smiled, unable to hold back the warmth that rose in me. "Tomorrow," I whispered. And as I walked home that evening, the city lights glowing like stars, I knew something had shifted forever. Tomorrow would not be like yesterday. Tomorrow would be ours. The next morning, I woke up with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Even the clatter of the subway and the chill of the New York air felt different, charged with a strange kind of joy. I reached the cafe early, unable to stop myself from smiling at nothing. Every detail felt sharper, the hiss of steaming milk, the hum of conversation, the golden glow of sunrise spilling through the window. But nothing mattered until the bell rang and Daniel walked in. We sat at the same table by the window, and this time, he spoke more. His words came slowly, carefully, like someone unused to being heard. He told me he worked at a newspaper, that he wrote small columns but longed for something greater. He confessed he often wandered the city just to watch people, trying to capture stories in fragments. Listening to him felt like reading poetry. I leaned forward, hanging on every detail. His world was so different from mine, yet it resonated with me. And when he left, really left, it filled the space with warmth so complete I nearly forgot we were still just two strangers learning each other's names. For the first time, I believed this could be more than fleeting. Still, I sensed walls around him. When he spoke about work, his eyes came alive. But whenever I nudged toward his past, where he was from, family, old memories, his voice dropped, guarded, as if a shadow lingered there. I didn't push. I knew what it was like to carry silence. That morning, instead of a casual word, he wrote on his cup, "Secrets." I hesitated, then wrote back, "Safe." His gaze locked on mine, and something unspoken passed between us. Then he said quietly, "I won't always be here, Emily. But I want you to know, these days with you are real." The words chilled me. My chest tightened as though he'd stolen my breath. I wanted to ask what he meant, but fear gripped me, pinning my questions to my throat. Instead, I smiled weakly, pretending calm while my heart pounded. After he left, I turned the empty cup over in my hands, staring at the fading ink. Secrets. Safe. My handwriting looked fragile, almost childish. For the first time, I wondered what he was hiding, and what it would cost us when the truth came out. Our days together continued, and each time we sat at that little table, the world around us blurred. We spoke more openly now, about music, about dreams, about the loneliness of the city. He told me he hated how people brushed past each other without ever really seeing. And when he looked at me, I knew he saw me. Truly. But shadows still clung to him. Some mornings, his words on the cup were heavy, full of fear. One day, he wrote, "Don't let go." My heart twisted as I replied, "Never." Our fingers brushed when I handed it to him, and for the first time, we didn't pull away. His touch lingered, fragile but alive, and it sent fire rushing through me. That evening, I walked home in the rain, replaying the moment over and over. The city blurred around me, lights smearing across wet sidewalks, and I felt both fragile and invincible. Even if everything ended tomorrow, I knew these moments were carved into me forever. Then came the day he placed his cup down and asked me to write my own name on it. Just one word, Emily. I hesitated, my throat tight, but then slowly traced each letter. Seeing my name there felt different, like giving him more than a word. Like giving him myself. When I handed it back, he looked at it as if it were something sacred. Then he said softly, "You've become the part of my life I never thought I'd find." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke me. Joy and fear tangled inside me. I wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to demand what he was hiding, but I couldn't. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Tomorrow, you'll understand." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart a storm. What would tomorrow bring? Hope and dread battled inside me. All I knew was that tomorrow held an answer I wasn't ready for, but desperately needed. Tomorrow arrived, and it was unlike any morning before. Daniel walked in carrying not one, but 2 cups. He set them gently on the table. On one was written his name, Daniel. On the other, mine, Emily. He looked at me and said, "We don't need notes anymore. We have voices now. And coffee for 2. I stared at those cups, tears pricking my eyes. All the mornings of silence, of waiting, of aching, had led to this simple, undeniable truth. We sat together, side by side, the cafe fading into background noise. Our laughter mingled with the scent of coffee, our words no longer hidden, our silences no longer frightening. There was no counter between us, no cardboard walls, no unanswered questions, only us. As the city roared outside, I realized something extraordinary. Love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or declarations. Sometimes, it begins quietly, with a marker and a paper cup. And from that day forward, it was no longer just his Americano or my ritual. It was ours. And finally, the coffee was truly for two.